Here we go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys have all had a chance to get some coffee. I see a bunch of you in here from the last talk. You stuck around from the Tiles talk. My name is Steve Sixero. I'm a development manager on the user-centered experience team in Windows. I've been at Microsoft for about 16 years, and I've been spending most of my career working on user experiences. I started off in Visual Studio, working on the Visual Studio development environment. I spent a lot of time there, about 7 years, all the way through .NET, and ended up working on a lot of the UI pieces. In Windows 7, my team and I worked on a bunch of UI pieces, including Logon UI, out-of-box experiences, and Home Group. Now in Windows 8, we're working on even more cool features. Some of those include roaming, some of the picture password stuff that you've seen this week, and sharing that we're going to talk about today. So I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you guys about the sharing stuff, along with Billy Sue. It's going to be a great talk.
Hi, I'm Billy Sue Chafins. I'm a lead program manager on the Windows User-Centered Experience team. I work with Steve. I've been at Microsoft for 11 years now, and all throughout my career I've focused on user experience. I've worked on everything from the end user features that you see every day when you use your PC, all the way down to the UI platforms that we use to deliver those end user features. In Windows 8, my team has been working on many different things, one of which is the share experience we're going to talk to you about today. So Steve and I are going to spend maybe the next hour or so talking to you about this Windows 8 share contract and how your apps, your amazing apps that you're going to go build, maybe you've already built some in the last couple of days, your apps are going to be what really power the sharing experience all throughout Windows. So let's get started. What are we going to cover in the next hour? First of all, I'm going to give you an overview of this Windows share contract. You've seen a few references to it already. Julie showed it in her keynote demonstration, and Jensen did a bit more of a deep dive in his big picture talk. You've seen a few people code against this. Steve's going to write even more code today.
Crossing my fingers.
Yes, we will cheer him on. We're going to give you an overview of why did we do this? What exactly are we trying to solve? Why should you care? Why should you invest? And why are we so excited about this? After that, I'm going to pop over to this other machine and give you a demonstration of the share contract in action. You've had a couple days now to play around with the Windows Developer Preview build, and you may have noticed some of those apps have already integrated with the share contract. I'm going to walk you through a few different demos, though, to point out specific concepts that make up this complete experience end to end. After that, Steve and I are going to spend some time talking to you about best practices and some things you should consider if you are integrating with a contract, if you're a source or a target. You're going to hear us say those two words quite a bit today. You may have heard reference to it already. Just a little recap. If you are building an app that has any content that can be shared, you're a source for share contract. And if you think about that for a moment, most likely every one of you in here building an app can be a share source. We think most everyone should be a source. On the other hand, if you're building an app that can consume this information, what you're building is a target. So there are two distinct sides to this that work together to create these really amazing end-to-end experiences for your customers. After we go through the best practices, then, drum roll, we're going to have a live action coding demo. Steve is so excited about this.
Yeah, thanks for making me a little bit more nervous now.
No pressure, but we will cheer him on. He's very excited about this, so you don't want to miss it. Stick around. At the end of the session, we hope you walk away understanding if you're building a share source, it is really quick and easy. I know you keep hearing that. Kip was talking about it in the tile presentation for people that were just here. It is really easy to integrate with this contract. In fact, I think Alesh and John showed it the other day on stage. It took four or five lines of code to light up as a share source. If you're building a target app, we want you to leave today understanding that you're really what's going to help create these complete end-to-end experiences for your customers. So let's get going. Let's step back for a moment and think about what exactly are we trying to do. So when we started planning for Windows 8, we're trying to figure out, okay, what are people doing today? What should we do? I think every one of you in here can identify with a time when you've came across really interesting information that you want to share with your friends or your family, or maybe it's interesting content that you want to leverage in another application, right? Everyone? Yeah? Okay. So Steve here, he has 3 cats, and he's one of those guys who loves to share videos of kitties playing piano or kitties writing code. I don't know where he finds
Kitties writing
this
code,
stuff.
that's actually, more in tune with what I like.
Very clever kitties.
Yeah.
Don't know where he finds this stuff, but he loves to share this. So that's one example of sharing. And then I'm going on vacation next week, and as soon as this talk is finished, I can actually start planning that vacation. I can start researching the restaurants that I want to go eat at. And if I come across a great review of a restaurant, maybe I want to share that into my trip planning app for reference later on. So these things are quite tricky today, if you think about it. Some apps make it quite easy, but in some apps it's really difficult. So imagine for a moment you're sitting there, you're browsing around the web, you find this really interesting information. You're really at the mercy of whatever that app chose that you should be able to share and how you should be able to share it. If they've made connections to the social network that you happen to use, you're in luck. If not, you're not. So the other thing is when you're using these apps, sometimes you have buttons all over the page. It's kind of crazy to try to figure out how to use it. Sharing is not as easy as it should be. And for developers, this is also quite tricky. So each service or app that you want to connect with, you have to decide that up front and create that direct connection as you're building your app. Every single app or framework that you want to connect with is probably a little different. It's different code that you have to write, different stuff that you have to maintain. It's a lot of burden on you, and you have to think of these things up front. And every time you want to add a new service, that's yet new code that you have to add to your app. And you also have to figure out how to build the user experience for your app. Those buttons all over the place. You got to figure out a way of how can you allow your users to share, but in a way that still gives them a great experience when they're using your app. So we really wanted to address this in Windows 8. And we've tried to do so with the Windows 8 Share contract and the Share experience. So Share provides a lightweight, in-context, easy experience for sharing. I think Jensen mentioned the other day fast and fluid was the blogosphere bingo word of the day. Well, after our talk, it's going to be in context and lightweight. Those are 2 things I want you to remember if you're building apps that integrate with the Share contract. What do we mean by this? So Share will work exactly the same way and be in the same place no matter where you are in Windows. It's always just one swipe away. You've seen a lot of the demonstrations show this, just one quick swipe in from the edge. It's in context where you find information. So if you come across the video of the kitty playing the piano and you want to share it to everyone on your team because we're just so thrilled to see it, you can share that out to your team and get right back to what you were doing. We view this as a fire and forget model. You find the information you want, you send it along, get right back to what you were doing. One of the really powerful things about Share is it's also tailored to users' preferences. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're trying to share today, you're really at the mercy of whatever the app has chosen to allow you to share to. So maybe it's not the social network I like. Maybe, for instance, Steve, he's a pretty clever guy. He spends some time on the weekends. He wants to make more friends, so he's created his own app. He's starting up his own social network. Most likely, the big news and magazine apps haven't picked up sharing to Steve's app, even though it's going to be awesome.
It could happen,
Yeah, I know. It's
I'll let you buy it for $1, actually.
I don't get it for free.
If you're my friend, you get it for free.
So just think about that for a minute. As you build your apps and you put them out there, you don't have to know up front who is going to pick up your content. That's pretty powerful. Windows is the glue that's going to tie all of these apps together. No longer are apps going to be silos, no more walled gardens. Everything's going to work together to create amazing experiences. So stepping back a moment, that just means that Share is universally accessible all throughout Windows, and it's a single swipe away. This is great for end users because it means it's super easy to use. People are just going to come to expect Share to work no matter where they are in Windows. They're not going to think about it anymore. There's no more overhead to it. It's just going to work. And for you devs, it's going to be great because it's going to give you universal exposure to your app, which is pretty cool, right? So I'm going to pop over here to this other machine and give you a demo. We're going to talk about 4 different things right here. First, I'm going to go through a demonstration that's going to show you just how quick in context and lightweight Share actually is. Then I'm going to go through a few more demos that are going to point out a few other concepts that we have. So let's get started. So I'm going to first of all launch the Build app. All of you have this app. You've been referencing this as you're figuring out which sessions to attend. Steve and I are really excited to be here right now. This is our session. It's pretty exciting.
Pretty cool.
And we want to let all our friends know we're on stage at this very moment presenting to all of you. So it's awesome. I'm right here in the Build app. One single swipe, tap the share charm, and then let's say I want to use Tweetorama to get this information out to my friends. I see that the session has already been populated in here, the App 405T session, which we're all in right now. I can quickly type that I'm excited to be presenting and not misspelling words, tap tweet, and off it goes. So there you go. It's that quick. In and out, fire and forget, back to where you were before. So now let's go through a couple more demos. I'm going to slow that down and talk about some of the concepts that just flashed by the screen. So as you're building your apps, you think about these things. So I'm going to launch the, let's see, Treehouse Stampede. Oh, yeah. This is great. How many of you have played Treehouse Stampede? Anyone? Yes.
Awesome game, isn't it?
It's awesome. Are you completely addicted at this point?
Stressful.
Oh, stressful. Well, we're going to add some more stress on ourselves and try to play it on stage. So we had an intern this summer who wrote this great game called Treehouse Stampede. I'm going to launch that. And if you weren't awake before, now you are. So the goal of this game is we've got a couple letters down here at the bottom, and we have to come up with a word. Ooh, Y-S-N.
Noisy.
Noisy. Awesome. Let's hope that works. Yes.
All right.
Let's try one more word. S-H-C.
Ooh, school.
School. Steve's good at this game. Awesome. So we could keep playing. This is what tends to happen as we've been practicing for our talk. It's a great game to procrastinate with. But let's say now we want to share our best word and our high score with our friends. We've all been doing this over the last couple weeks. We've had a great time, rubbing in what our best word is. So it's really easy. All I do is swipe in from the side, choose Share, and then I choose the app that I want to share this with. I'm going to launch Socialite. And the thing you'll notice, I had a pretty good word before coming up on stage here, anti-disestablishmentarianism.
I think that has every single letter.
Almost. It's a good one. You can even copy-paste and cheat and get a high score. So you'll notice, I was really excited when I found that out. You'll notice here that I didn't copy anything out of, we've noticed in the blogosphere that people are saying, oh, share's the new copy-paste. No, it's not. When I was playing that game, there was nothing on the screen for me to copy. That app did not have a selection model. The developer who created that app decided that if the user wants to share from here, what do they want to share? Probably their best word. And so this developer chose to send that information over, and the target app can pick that up. I could type an extra message in here, but I'm just going to share that, and now all my friends now see what my best word has been so far. So we refer to this as an implicit selection model, and we want to talk a lot about this one throughout the day because it's kind of a new way of thinking about it. All of us are used to copy-paste, right? You copy a link, you copy some text, you copy an address, and then you paste that somewhere else. That's not a great experience, really. You have to switch windows, then you have to alt-tab between windows, and by the end, you've probably forgotten what you were doing in the first place.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so with something like a game, or whatever app you're building as a source, think about if the user were to go to share from any spot in your app, what makes most sense to share? So in this situation, it was that best word. So let me go through another example. Let's go back to Internet Explorer, and I'm going to point out a few other things. Now, we think implicit sharing is an awesome thing, but obviously we still support an explicit model. So I can be here in Internet Explorer. I can select some text. And now when I go to share, you'll see that's the information that's getting passed over to the target. So let me pause here a second on this share pane and call out a few different things you want to keep in mind as you're building your apps. So you'll notice at the top, under the share header, we have a little description. So whenever you're getting ready to share something, maybe you've had this experience before, you thought you were sharing one thing, it got posted on your wall, and then your 1,000 friends read it, and that absolutely was not what you meant to share. Steve, has that ever happened to you?
I think I ran into that, actually. When I was developing some of the code that you'll see later, I sort of accidentally posted something to my wall that you'll see I use the flashcards app, and one of the things I did was post camel to my
Just
wall.
the word
Just
camel.
the word camel. It was surprising because a lot of people actually liked that without knowing what context I had that in.
Yeah, it was really special.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful. You want to know what you're actually getting ready to share. It is super quick. You're going to be doing this really quickly, right? So at the top, you get a description of what the source app has passed for the target app to pick up. So you see here that I have the Channel 9 app. It's got the URL here, and it would show that it's selected content. Now, in this pane, you notice a couple different sections. We have what's called frequent. You may hear me refer to this as well as quick links as we go through the demonstration. What this means is when we were doing research for this feature, when we were doing planning, we realized that people have a tendency to share to the same app, to the same place in an app, or the same person in an app over and over again. You have your favorites. And so we've talked about share. We want it to be lightweight, in context, and easy. We want to be super quick. So knowing that people have these favorite things that they tend to do over and over, we created this concept of a quick link, which is a quick link back into that target app. And so for those of you in the room that are going to build target apps, this is a really great thing to keep in mind. So for instance, if I've emailed Stephen in the past, if I choose Stephen right here, it's going to launch the Mail app as a target and already have Stephen's address pre-populated in the to line. So it saves me steps. We want to make this as fast as possible, and these things I do often to be right at my fingertips. Beneath that section, you see the app list. Now, again, in the spirit of making this as fast as possible, this doesn't just show every app that I have installed. It shows me the apps that know how to receive the content that the source app is sending over. So things will get filtered. Okay? So in this situation, let's say I had shared an image from the build site. And let's pretend that Tweetorama didn't know how to deal with images. It would not be showing in this app list right now. So it's totally tailored to the user's preferences because these apps are the ones I've chosen to download. And it's tailored to this experience because it only shows up, an app only shows up here if it knows what to do with the content that the source is sending over. Okay? So in this case, let's go into Socialite and we'll see that what got shared over in this case was the URL. I can post that and be on my way. I'm going to show you one final example here. I'm going to launch the Photos app. Now, you know, we talked a little bit about doing some quick shares of text and stuff, but we often share images or files that may be quite large. And in some cases, the share may take a while. It may take a while for these 6 or 7 large images to go in my email program that I share them to. So we took care of that from a user experience perspective and in the architecture. Steve will talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But let's just do this demo. Let's say I want to select, you know, a few different photos. Let's just select 5 or 6 of these. Let's go into the share pane, and we see that I have this app called FriendSend that knows how to take images. I can select FriendSend, and you see I have this preview at the top. Again, you want to give that user confidence that they're sharing what they think they're sharing. And then I can say, okay, I'm going to share these. Oh, let's see, who would I want to share these with? My manager, Katie. So I'm going to send these off to Katie. I tap share, and the share starts. So you notice here, it's going to take a little while for this to complete. But we don't want you to have to sit there and stare at that. So I can tap away, and the share will just continue in the background. Now let's say I want to know, okay, where's that share? You know, are those images done? Can I call up Katie and we can look at these images together? If I go back into the share pane, you'll notice down here at the bottom it says check sharing progress. So if a share is taking a while, I can tap that and go to another pane in the share UI, and it shows me shares that are in progress. I can quickly tap that and get back to the target app and get more detailed information on how things are going. Here I can see it's at 47% complete, so it's still going along. That's great. So we want you to be able to get right back to what you were doing. We don't want you to have to sit there and stare at this upload until it finishes. But we also want to give you the confidence that if you want to check back to see if it worked, we give you a piece of UI to do that. And like I said, we'll talk about it from the architecture point of view in just a moment. So that's a demo, a quick demo. We saw a few different things. We saw how quick it should be. We saw how you can do different types of selection, implicit and explicit selection. We saw how, as a target app, you should take advantage of those quick links so you show up in that frequent section. And we saw how the apps will appear in the app list. And we talked a little bit about how that app list is filtered based on the source and the target having an agreement of what they're actually sharing. So it's really cool if you step back and think about it. This means that Windows is doing the heavy lifting here. So that as app developers, you don't need to know a whole lot about each other before you create these experiences. No longer do you have to think upfront when you build your app, like, wonder who my users are going to want to share to. Let me go figure out how to code against all of those apps and frameworks. No, all you do is tell us, I have some data I know how to share, and then the targets say, I know how to take that data, and then we facilitate that sharing experience. So this contract is the glue that is going to bind apps together. Like I said earlier, there are no more silos, no more walled gardens around apps. And really to impress upon this point, we were talking earlier about how devs, you don't have to know much about each other. We were just giving a little example earlier. Steve didn't think these guys back here in the orange shirt.
Yeah, the 4 of you there.
We think you guys know each other. Yeah. So you weren't good for our example. But this guy over here in the 5th row in the green shirt, let's say he wants to write a source app. And let's say this guy over here in the 4th row in the red shirt, you want to write a target app. I'm guessing you guys don't know each other, but you don't have to create these really great experiences for your customers. And these experiences just keep getting better the more and more apps there are. So every new app that appears in the store that integrates with a shared contract just increases the sharing possibilities. And that's a very powerful aspect of this contract and why we think as developers this is very appealing for you to get exposure to your app. And end users are going to love this. Like we said, it's just going to become a ubiquitous action throughout Windows. People are just going to expect it to work. So Steve, I've told them a little bit about the user experience and why this thing is so awesome to plug into. Can you tell us a little bit about how the data actually moves back and forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the data, what you're actually doing as a source, and then what you're doing as a target. So like you've seen, the source is the app that actually has all the information that you want to pass over to a target. Target doesn't need to know about it, but you have to have some way of being able to communicate with each other. So Windows is doing that communication for you. We're going to call that, later on you'll see it's called the share broker. But all that data lives inside of your source app. And now we have to be able to package that up somehow. So we conveniently call the thing data package. So that data package is part of what you fill in as a source. First thing you need to do as a source is register with what we call the data transfer manager, because we got to transfer some data across to the other target. Be really clever with our names. We also decided that data transfer manager isn't the only word that's going to define what we're doing in terms of Windows. We're also going to call it the share broker. Now the share broker does a little bit more. It actually looks at the UI that you're selecting as a user and determines what the active app is and sends that active app an information that it's been activated for sharing. So when the user is now selected, that you've selected that share charm like you've seen in some of the demos, information gets passed to the source app. The source app is then told, hey, I need to go start filling out a data package. Now, if you've seen in some of the demos, you're going to spend some time filling out that data package. There's some simple stuff that you put in there, a title, a description, etc. You might have to do some other work and complete some async calls. You might be getting some files off disk or something like that. So you finish that off and you return back. Now, you're going to have to end up saying to the share broker that you've completed that operation. Once you do that, the UI will come up. The share broker will then filter the list of all the target apps that are available that can actually look at that data package and decide what are the things that I want to show. As Billy Sue mentioned, if you're passing in an image, Tweetorama doesn't accept images today, and so it won't show in that list. Its quick links won't be there, and neither will it as an app. We'll do the filtering for you. The user will then select what they want to actually share with in terms of a target. When you actually do that, we go ahead and we activate the target. So that target app, as you saw, comes up in that share pane in a different view. Then that active target is told that you're being activated for sharing. So now you don't want to bring your view up in normal, like full screen, full pixel, edge-to-edge view. That's not really going to be very helpful to end users. It's not going to be able to fit all the data that you want in one particular smaller space. So you really want to tailor that for that view. Once you're activated for sharing, you actually get access to that data package. So you can actually, at that point, start rendering your page, what you see in that view, with some of the information that's being passed across. And further demos, you're going to see that we're going to pass across some text, descriptions, as well as bitmaps and thumbnails. You'll be able to take that information and actually render that page so that the user gets a better idea of what's going to actually happen. And most importantly, once you're done, you have to report that you've completed back to the share broker. That tells us that the window can go away, a long-running share is now done and completed so that we can provide that information to the user. So pretty simple.
So Steve, we've heard a few presentations about process lifetime management and apps getting suspended. How does that factor in here?
You know, I always forget about that because if you work with the share contract, you don't have to worry about it. The share contract is going to set that all up for you and take care of it. It's going to keep the target app, its process alive, until all the information is passed across to it. So you don't have to worry about that. And if you end up as a target app pushing your information out to the cloud somewhere, and you're using the upload broker APIs, which you can read about in some of the sample documentation, we actually do that work for you as well. We manage all of that, so you don't have to worry about any process lifetime or any upload brokering. Great point. So let's talk about the data package a little bit. What is the data package? Well, like I said, it's a bunch of information that you as a source are filling in that you think is reasonable to be passing to another target. Now you can share in a bunch of data formats that exist. We provided you with a bunch of standards. URIs, text, images, HTML, etc. A lot of that is described in the sample docs that you have. We also wanted to make sure that Windows provided you a mechanism to come up with new and different ways of sharing information. So we have extensible formats. We allow a couple of APIs, and you'll see that later on, where you can actually set some text to be whatever you want, whatever format ID you want, as well as data in a stream that you want. Now, it's really important that if you're going to do that, that you've come up with some way of looking at particular standards that some target app might actually be able to understand. It doesn't really make sense to go create your own format. You guys in the orange are probably going to do that. But don't do that, because we won't be able to figure out what the filtered list of apps are going to be. If you come up with a format that's your own, nobody's going to be able to look at it. The user experience is not going to be as rich as possible. So what we want you to do is take a look at standards that exist there today. Great standards like schema.org. They have ways of looking at particular text strings that tell you, what this particular schema is. Things like people, contacts, address books, places. All of that can be defined in this extensible format. So if you do that and a target app does that, you'll be able to communicate your data across and get that information to the target. The target will be able to utilize that, and it will be a richer user experience. Now, the other thing that you want to worry about when you're actually filling in that data package, make sure that if you have a bunch of information about what you're passing, that you actually put that in the data package. You don't have to just put text. You don't have to just put a URL. Think about what information might be useful to some of those targets. If you just decide to put text, user experience might be okay. If you're just saying, I'm going to do a quick tweet, that might be fine. But if you have more information, like a JPEG or some other image type, you might put that in the data package as well. That provides a richer experience for end users. Other things that you can do at this point, even if you just pass an image, you could also pass some other information like geolocation tags. You could do some things with tags that the user has actually put into your app and pass that along. Something that somebody could do on a target side is take that information, create categories or something else based on that data. So really fill out your data package as richly as possible. The other thing you want to look at is the more data formats that you support, the more filtered, the larger the filtered list is going to be of target apps. So your data can go to more target apps that are out there. So let's get into a little bit of code at this point. I'll get into a full demo later. You've seen a lot of this already in some of the demos that have existed. First thing you need to do is set yourself up with a data transfer manager. If you remember the diagram I showed, it's pretty straightforward. You add an event listener to your code. You write some code that might be very app specific. And there are some common properties that you're going to want to use. First thing we actually require you to do is set a title. When you actually bring up that sharing pane where it says what are the quick links and what are the apps, that title is going to be at the top. And you saw that with what Billy Sue was showing. The next piece is description. Description is a little bit more information to the user. It's an optional field, but we recommend that you use it. it's a little bit more info that the user can look at. They can hover over it. It might give them a tooltip of more info. So when we did that selection thing in IE, it could actually show you all of the text in the tooltip. Finally, there's thumbnails. If you have a thumbnail, it just makes the information that gets passed to the target app richer, so that they can actually see that they're posting a camel or something else. So those are some of the common ones. There are a few more. Now we talked about some common methods as well. Now some of the formats that we provide, like I said, text, HTML, URIs, bitmaps, images, those all exist and you should be able to use those today. So if any of you have started building your share source or your targets, this is some of the stuff that you've been doing already. And finally, we talk about some custom data. This is what I talked about in terms of extensible formats. In this case, you see the text and the data functions there. Format ID is really what you want to do in terms of a standard format. So for you web developers out there, schema.org is a great place. It tells you about, as I said, things that are defined across in standards that other apps could actually utilize. So make sure you take a look at that and make sure that you use standard formats. So now that we know kind of a little bit about the data package, let's talk about source apps a little bit more.
Great. Okay, so I think I'm sounding like a broken record, but we definitely want everyone to consider being a source app, especially when share becomes so ubiquitous throughout Windows. Like I said, users are just going to expect it to work. So if your app has content that makes sense to share and you don't participate in the contract, the user's just going to expect that to work. They're not going to understand. So we wanted to help you get going thinking about, okay, well, what type of apps are we talking about? So we've been brainstorming a little bit of what are the different categories of source apps that we expect. So news and magazine apps, obviously, if I come across an interesting news article, I want to share that with a friend, I want to be able to do that quickly. Magazine articles, yeah. So Steve, what's your favorite magazine?
Well, if you've read my bio, I like motorsports and curling. And I see one person from Canada here, so I know you know what curling is.
Awesome. So Steve is going to share all his curling information with you. But we would expect these different types of apps to provide that information very easily to be able to share it out to target apps. Media apps. So if I come across an interesting song or video or image that I want to share, I should be able to do that really quickly. Games, you saw Treehouse Stampede.
This one's my favorite, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Trash talking. Make sure you do that.
Yes, Steve likes to share some interesting things. So games, we definitely think, you want to share that high score, or you want to be able to trash talk with your friends really easily. That makes sense as a share source. You would send that over in the data package. Social networking. Every time I see something interesting that my friends have posted on my wall, I may want to quickly share that with my broader set of friends. So it makes sense to be a source app. Note-taking apps. So as Steve and I were working on this deck, he often had the PowerPoint deck locked. So it turned out he had to do more work. I would just go into my note-taking app, share with him via email what those notes were, and then he had to go update the deck. Cloud storage apps. So I may have some files stored in my favorite cloud storage app, and I want to be able to share those out. So it makes sense as a source. So like I said, we did some brainstorming to come up with what we thought were some interesting categories, but we just don't know what you guys are going to go build. We can't even fathom all the experiences you're going to go enable. So really just step back and think about, do you have content or interesting context in your app where people would want to share that information? And if so, you should build a source app. So a few things to consider if you are a source app. One, it's really easy. All you have to do is listen for and handle the share event when that takes place to participate. Remember that content can be shared in a couple different ways. We talked about the implicit versus the explicit sharing model. So don't just think about if you have something on the screen that the user can select. Also think about that context. And you want to make sure that you build that data package for the best results. You want to include many different formats that represent the data, and you want to make it really rich so that when the information makes it into a target app, the user has a really great experience. So Steve, you have talked us through the data package. Can you give us an overview of what it takes to become a source? We keep saying 5 lines of code.
Yeah, it really is literally just 5 lines code. And as you've seen in some of the demos this week, this should look familiar to you if you saw them type this on stage. Again, this is sort of a recap of what we showed a few minutes ago. You're setting yourself up with the data manager, our data transfer manager, getting yourself an event, and then filling out some of the data package. In this particular case, I have some titles, some description, some text. You can have more rich information as well. We encourage that. So as you can see, a source is just easy to set yourself up. So if you have data to share, absolutely you can do it in just minutes. So, learned a little bit more about source. I don't think we've talked about target yet.
Yeah, so we're really excited to talk about target. Many of the demonstrations you've seen so far focus on the source side. And Steve's in particular very excited about this because no one has written code to turn an app into a target, but he's going to do that today. Before we get there, let's talk about what are those categories we think should be target apps. Now, unlike sources, we don't think every app should be a target. If your app can publish, store, or transform data in some way, you should be a target app. So a few different categories that we think are possible. Obviously, social networking. This makes tons of sense. This is where your friends and family are. That's how you want to get information out to them. Communication apps. So email apps, IM apps, chat apps. Obviously, these make sense to share content into. Entertainment apps. So if you come across a really great movie review and you want to remember that and put it in your favorite entertainment app queue, you should be able to do that very easily. Some others you may not have thought about. Print service. So let's say you want to put together a photo book, you want to share some images into this print service, and then you send it off, they send you a book in the mail, and it's all nice and fancy. So that print service app also makes sense as a target because you could share your images into that application. Another one is device-connected apps. So often when you have a device and you connect it to the PC, it will bring down an app that goes along with it. So let's say you have a device where you can sync images to that device. So there may be an app that's running on your PC to help facilitate the syncing. So that definitely makes sense as a target app. We view Share as getting information between apps. So we talk a lot about the social networking apps, but it's any type of app that can consume that information. Could also be a note-taking app. If I'm planning that vacation that I'm taking in a week, I probably want to share some of that information into my note-taking app so I can remember to go do these things while I'm not working. Cloud storage. So if I come across some really interesting images or other things that I want to store in my cloud storage app, it could also make sense as a target. So this is one of those examples. We think everyone should be a source, some people should be targets, but sometimes it may make sense to be both. It's up to you. It's whatever makes sense for your app and your scenarios. And just like on the source side, we can't even imagine all the things that you're going to go build. We're really actually quite excited now that you have the build in your hands to see what we start reading about in the coming weeks and months. So just really take these as examples to help guide you to answer that question of should I build a target app? So again, things you should consider if you're going to build a target app. First of all, you'll register as a share target, and you're going to have to specify up front the formats that your app will accept. Part of that facilitating between the source and target, part of what we do as Windows is the heavy lifting. We need to know which formats that you can take so that when we bring up that share pane, we can do the filtering of the app list. The second point is really key. You want to build your app, the UI that's going to show up in this target view, in a way that makes sense for sharing. So all of you that have been playing with the Windows Developer build, preview build, you've maybe opened up Socialite and you see that you have a feed and your friends and your wall. It's a full app. But you may have noticed when I was doing my demo, when I brought up Socialite as a target, it wasn't the full app. It was brought up in a view that was very tailored to sharing and what I probably want to do when I'm sharing information quickly, which was just a message box so I could type a quick message, post, and off it would go. So you want this view of your app to feel very similar to the look and feel of your full app, but you want it to be very tailored to being activated as part of Share. And you want to make sure that it feels really quick and lightweight. You want to take the data that was in that data package and tailor that to the user experience. We've asked that the source package up a lot of these different formats to give a rich view of the data, and that's so that you as the target can give a great preview in your app. So if you get an image and a link and some text, you want to take that to build up a really great preview of what the user is going to share in your app. When you finish, you should definitely make sure you report completion. As you saw in my long-running share example, you should let us know that you're finished so we take you out of that UI that is showing that you're still going. And finally, you should consider returning we encourage you to return a quick link, especially if there are multiple steps to get information to the user, to the place in your app. You want these things to bubble up as really quick things to do, right at users' fingertips. So now this slide. Again, why should you invest? As we've said, and as you've heard at the keynote and the big pictures, without apps, we have nothing, right? So we need you to build target apps so that we can have these really great end-to-end experiences for your customers and our customers. By integrating with Share, you're going to increase the usage of your app, and it's going to keep your service fresh with content that matters to your users. So Steve, you've told us about the Source app. Can you tell us a bit more about the Target app?
Yeah. So Source apps, all the demos you've seen so far, a few lines of code. Target apps, they're just a little bit more difficult, but still not that hard. So one of the things, if you use Visual Studio 11, you'll be able to actually add the contract just by going to one of their templates. What you're actually doing, it's going to create a bunch of files for you. It's going to create a CSS file. It's going to create a JS file if you're using JavaScript. It's going to end up creating an HTML file as well. That HTML file is what your view is going to be rendered in that sharing pane. It's also going to update your manifest. So this is the package manifest, your AppX. So I'm giving you actually what it looks like if you open this in Notepad or in Visual Studio. So right here, in this particular example, I'm declaring that I can be a share target. This declaration, which says share target, also specifies which HTML page is going to open. And you can see there it says share target.html. Now I also have to decide, well, what are the supported file types that I actually can use? In this case, I'm just using JPEG. You can use a whole bunch, or you can, in Visual Studio, select all supported file types. The other thing I'm doing here is deciding that my app is only going to support text, but you may also want to say it supports images, it supports other things. So I encourage you to play with Visual Studio, see what all the options are, and give that a shot. Now the bulk of the work is going to happen in your code. So in this case, in the JavaScript code that I've got here, the first thing I'm going to do after I've been activated, I'm getting an activation event, I'll get activated with a particular type. Now that type, as you see, is share target. So now that I know that I'm being activated as share target, I can actually take some of that information. I know that I'm getting a share operation. From that, I know that I can start accessing the information that's in the data package. So that UI that I'm going to go render on that sharing pane, I can actually make richer. So in this case, I'm taking title, I'm taking description, putting that on the page. If I had a thumbnail, I could do that as well. Now we're going to get into that in a second. I'm going to show you how easy it's going to be to take a couple of apps that we actually have. But first, I want to just recap quickly kind of what happens. So you've got your source app over here, you've got your target apps over there. Data flows from one to another, and Windows is sitting in between, making sure that all of the pieces that the user is experiencing all feel fluid. All right, who's ready for some code?
Who's ready to see a target app?
All right,
too?
ready for some code. Let's switch over.
We're going to cheer him on.
All right, so what I've got here is I'm going to hit the desktop. Like I said, I'm going to take the flashcards app, which actually my intern on my team built, and I'm going to make it a share source. I'm going to run it first and show you that today it doesn't actually do any sharing. So wait a second here. Here we go, flashcards. Anybody played with this app yet? It's pretty cool, yeah. So let's go in. First thing you see, it shows you a bunch of categories. Let's choose animals. This is random, so I have no idea what's actually going to show up. Cute bunny rabbit. There might be something that's not cute, maybe snakes, maybe spiders.
Alive with activity.
Yep. So you go here, select share, and you don't actually get an experience from flashcards. You're getting basically the default experience that you see from Windows. In this case, you could share a screenshot. Now, I think we can do a lot better than this. So let's stop here, go back to Visual Studio, stop debugging, and go through and add some code. So what you're seeing here is the default JS file that I've got and the activation method. Now I've decided that as users select one of those categories, either animals, places, things, etc., I'm going to go add some code that says, hey, when they select one of those pages, I want that image to actually be shared. And I want some text from that to be shared as well. So here I am in the showDeck function. That's the place that gets called as soon as the user selects one of those tiles. So in the showDeck function, I'm going to add some code. I've decided I'm going to add kind of what you've seen already in the demos and what you've seen in the slides so far, activation of the data transfer manager and setting myself up. So what am I doing? First step here, I'm adding my event listener. This will get called back on me at some point when the user has actually selected the charm. I'm the active app. I'll get called by the share broker. I'm then going to be able to take that information and fill in a request object. Here, I'm going to take the title that is basically what you're seeing on the page, putting that into the title object here. I'm going to fill out a description so that people can actually see it. And then I'm going to set some text that Flashcards has. But I'm going to be doing a little bit more creative things. So I'm going to go share an image. So that's going to be a little bit more app specific. Your app may choose to share more things. You may choose to share URLs and other things. Let's go here. I've got some code already written. This is how I'm sharing an image. Now most of this is very app specific. This app in particular saves its images locally on disk. So what I have to start doing is going through here, opening up the files on disk based on which image is actually showing, add it to a stream so that I can have a thumbnail. Now that thumbnail will get passed over in the data package. Then the target UX could actually render it if it so chooses. Setting some storage items, and then I'm going to make an async call to actually get that information off the disk. Once I'm done, I have to make sure that I say deferral is complete so that the share broker knows I've actually filled my data package in correctly. All right, who's ready to see if this is now going to share? Hit F5. Here we are in flashcards. We've got our rabbit. Oh, it switched over to a cat. And we'll go to share. So now you see the sharing UI. So some app-specific code, not that much. A little bit of hooking yourself up with the sharing broker. So now I can go in here, I can select friend send. You can see friend send has actually taken that image that I've passed across as well. Now in friend send's case, it's not actually using any of the text. But if your app decides to use it or not is up to you. Okay, let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's now stop. And let's switch over to another app. That was your share source. That's what everybody's been showing you this week. Has anybody actually built a source app yet? No, it's so easy. Oh, there's one. Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Good job. I want to talk to you later. See what you're building. So let's go to NoteSpace.
So this is where Steve is very excited. No one has actually turned an app into a target yet.
My thunder has not been stolen yet, and if you know that it has, please don't tell me. So, like I said, the first thing that you have to do is sort of declare your capabilities. Now, I can easily go into Visual Studio and add one of the templates. So I can go here, right-click, say Add, New Item, and then scroll down, and you'll see the share contract. Now what you see here, I can go in here and it'll add those files that I talked about earlier, and it'll also update my manifest. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you the manual way of doing it today. So here I have my package manifest file open. So I'm going to go to the Declarations tab, and I'm going to drop down this Available Declarations section and say that I want to build a share target. Now, I'm going to hit Add, and now you see the suggested file types. I'm going to go with the example that I had before. I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to add .jpeg, and I'm going to add data formats, add some text. Now, most importantly, and this is a step I almost always forget, is that you have to set which HTML page is going to come up. If I just left it as default, then you'd see the NoteSpace UX. Let's change that to share target, which I've already created. So now I've got sharetarget.html. So when you actually use Visual Studio for the templates, it's going to give you a very basic kind of template. So in your HTML file, you're going to get some information. You're going to include some basic JS files. But what I have here, I've got a couple of IDs. I've got some headers. But most importantly, I have a button. And that button is Submit. Now this is where I made a mistake where I posted to Camel. I forgot the Submit button, and it just sort of uploaded right off the bat. You have to make sure that you're giving the user the opportunity to actually click Submit so they know that you haven't done it yet. They may choose to back out. So don't just go ahead and submit as soon as your UI shows up. All right, so pretty basic HTML file. So let's go into my sharetarget.js. Now, first thing that you need to do, and as a web dev, you know that you have to get your activation event. So here I've got my activation event. I'm going to add some of that code in here. Let's talk about that for a little second. The first thing, like you saw in my sample a couple of slides ago, I'm going to be activated with shareTarget. So with that activation kind, I know that there's some information that's going to be passed to me and I can do something with it. So the first thing I'm going to do in there, I know that I'm being activated with shareTarget. I'm going to make sure that event that for the click on that share button is selected and it's going to call onShareSubmit. I also know that I'm being passed some information. So I set myself a global variable I'm going to use later, call it the share operation. From that, I'm getting some information. I'm getting the title and the description. I'm going to put that into a couple of the headers that I have on the page so that the user can actually see it. Now, you're also going to get some information if you're activated via quick link. So if you're activated via quick link, you're going to know that this section here is not blank. You're going to be activated by a quick link. And in this particular case, I've decided I'm going to make it a little bit easier for users. When you see the UI, I also had this text box that users could actually go in. And if you played with NoteSpace, you know that it allows you to put images and text and other things into groups. What I'm doing here is allowing this to set up such that the user doesn't have to type a group. We'll see that a little bit later. So I go ahead and I set the value, that quick link value, into that text box. A little bit more code here. Make sure that you do some try-catch work. I'm also taking the information from the image that's passed across, the thumbnail. I'm going to take that, push it into one of the components on the page. So that's pretty straightforward on activation. So let's go ahead and do the submit code. So now, submit. Again, very important that you allow your user to actually hit that share button or submit button. Here I'm doing some app-specific things where I'm checking the group name. If one was actually in the box, then I'm going to use that. If nothing was there, I'm going to set a default and say I don't want a quick link. Your app can do whatever it chooses. If you want to do that, great. If you don't, that's up to you. I do some disabling of some elements on the page, and then I call the meat of the app, in this case, where I'm loading and then saving some of the information. Now, this is going to be very specific to your app, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. It doesn't necessarily have to do a lot with share. What I'm doing here, I'll end up opening some of the data files that this app is storing and injecting some of the information into it. So let's go ahead, go to load. Some interesting things in here. First thing I'm doing, this is very app specific. I'm creating some files. I'm getting some streams, taking that, and then I'm going to call a couple of other functions. The next function that is most interesting is insert image. So insert image is basically going through that data that I've got in the JSON. That's how this app is actually storing it in a file. I'm going through, figuring out where I want to put this in a group based on what the user's actually selected, and I'm injecting it at that point. And then finally, I have to do some save. This is going through again in that JSON, saving that file out to disk, making some async calls, and getting that done. Most importantly, you have to report that you've now been completed. So the report completed function, this tells the share broker that you are done with the information that you've been passed. Now, first thing I'm doing here is setting up a quick link. So if I was activated by a quick link, I'm not going to set up a new one. It doesn't make sense. There's already one there, especially if it's for that particular group. So my app has decided, if that group already exists, don't set up another one. I'm going to say what type of formats this quick link actually supports. Like I said, we decided we were just going to support JPEGs. And we're also supporting some text as the data format. Now finally, I'm going to take the file, write the file out, but most importantly, I'm going to call share report completed. This is telling the data transfer manager and the share broker that we're done, the UI can go away, and we've taken all the information we wanted. All right, who thinks this is going to compile? I hope it compiles. You do? All right, let's run. So what you're going to see here, NoteSpace is coming up edge to edge in its full UI. NoteSpace, not in its sharing view at this point. I'm going to go back to flashcards, run our flashcards app, take our rabbit, hit share, and now you see that NoteSpace is there listed as an app under the app section. So I can go ahead and select it, and now that code that I just wrote is being run. Taking that image, I'm changing some of the headers on the page. I have a group that I'm going to select. I'm going to type into it, call it animals. I'm going to hit share. Now I'm done. I'm still in context in flashcards. Let's see what happens if I go ahead and add cat. Oops. Now, that quick link thing that I talked about. Now you see it in the frequent list. And I decided to take the image that I was first passed in of the first group. There you see our little bunny rabbit. And I can call Notespace and say, save image in animals group. So now, animals is already populated. That information from the quick link was passed to me. I don't have to type anything. I can just go ahead and hit share. I've got a cat. Now I'll have a bear. So let's now go back to Notespace. There's our Notespace app. Here's my animals group. Here we go. We've got bunny, rabbit, cat, and bear. Phew, that worked. So let's go back to Visual Studio for a second, because I demoed this a couple weeks ago to my team, and they said, hey, Steve, that's great. That works really well. But you know, it doesn't look very Metro. So they asked me to spend a little bit of time in remedial designing with some folks, and we decided to come up with a different design. So all I have to do is, create a different set of CSS or add some graphics. I've already done that. Code is the same. I'm just going to go ahead, change the start page to share target 2, hit F5. We'll see our groups and everything. This is our animals. Go back to start. Let's bring up flashcards. Or not, demo fail. Maybe a demo fail. Let's try that again. All right. Let's just kill flashcards and start that one again.
It is prettier now, I promise. The program managers helped Steve put together something that looked nicer. Remember, you want to have that target experience to be tailored. You want it to feel really nice and quick and lightweight. So we gave Steve some assistance here, and that's what he's going to show you in just a moment.
I don't like any of those. Shark. I like shark. All right.
Shark.
That's the other thing with flashcards. If you actually touch it, it actually says the name of the word, or the thing you're touching. Let's go ahead and share. Go ahead, share a Notespace. And I've got something that looks a lot more Metro. So you can go ahead. You see everything's still filled out the same. I can just hit share, and off you go. So that's how easy it is to do this. Sharing targets, sharing sources. Very easy for you to accomplish that.
Great. So let's flip back over to the slides and recap what we have talked to you about for the last hour. So by integrating with a share contract, the thing to keep in mind is your app is going to connect your customers with people and apps that they care about. This contract is going to be the glue that binds all these apps together, and your apps are going to be what powers sharing all throughout Windows. The really key thing we want you to walk away with is to understand that the share landscape is going to be ever evolving. So when you build your app, just know that there are going to be even more and more sharing opportunities come online as more and more apps come online. The more apps that we have, the more sharing opportunities. So we have a couple related sessions we want to point you to. I think both of these have already happened, so if you didn't catch them, you want to go maybe watch the videos afterwards. Sam Moreau's Designing Metro-Style Apps is really important, especially for the Target app. We saw that Steve's first attempt at a beautiful app wasn't so beautiful. So had he watched Sam's video, he probably would have been able to do this on his own.
I did miss that talk, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other talk that is related is Jeff Johnson's How to Declare Your App's Capabilities talk. So we have some further reading and documentation for you. These are listed here. They'll be in the deck that will be posted afterwards. And we just want to say thank you for coming, and we really are excited to see what apps that you go build. We're really excited to use your apps to see all the great opportunities, all the great sharing experiences that you create. So Steve and I are going to head down to the expo hall. They've got quite a bit of equipment they have to set up in here for the next talk. But if you have any questions around, should I integrate with this? Does it make sense for my app? Or some more questions about the code, come see us down in the expo hall. We'll be at one of the apps booths, and we're happy to chat with you. We'll also be available at 5:30 this afternoon at the Ask the Expert session. So thank you for coming. We hope you go build some great apps.
Thanks.